Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Today, I want to tell you about a girl who was fifth in line to the throne, raised in near total isolation, controlled by a strict set of rules designed to make her weak and obedient. But this girl grew up to rule the largest empire the world has ever seen for 63 remarkable years, giving her name to an entire era of history. Her name was Victoria. How did a lonely, tightly controlled child become the most powerful monarch of her time? Say with me, because her story is far stranger and more dramatic than most people realize. And if you enjoy true stories like this one, please subscribe, because we bring you a new one every single week. It was a rainy evening in May 1819 at Kensington Palace in London. Inside, a baby girl was born to the Duke of Kent, a son of the reigning king, and his wife, a German princess named Victoire. They named the baby Alexandrina Victoria. At the time, almost nobody expected this baby would ever become queen. She was fifth in line to the British throne, behind several uncles who were expected to have children of their own and push her further down the list. But then, tragedy struck twice within the same year. When Victoria was just 8 months old, her father died suddenly from pneumonia. And then, only days later, her grandfather, King George III, also died. Her uncles took the throne one after another, but none of them produced an heir who survived. Slowly, almost accidentally, little Victoria moved closer and closer to becoming queen, simply because the men ahead of her kept failing to have children. Her childhood, however, was anything but normal or happy. Victoria's mother, along with a controlling advisor named Sir John Conroy, created an extremely strict set of rules for raising the young princess. Historians later called it the Kensington system. Under the system, Victoria was almost never left alone. She was not allowed to sleep in a room by herself. Her mother's bed was placed right beside hers every single night until the day she became queen. She was not allowed to play freely with other children her own age. She had to hold someone's hand while walking downstairs. Every part of her day was watched, controlled, and recorded. The goal, many historians believe, was to make young Victoria completely dependent on her mother and on Conroy, so that when she did become queen, they could control the power behind the scenes. Victoria, even as a child, sensed this. She grew to deeply resent Conroy. She felt suffocated. She felt watched every moment of every day. Despite all of this control, though, something inside young Victoria remained fiercely independent. She kept detailed diaries from a young age, writing down her true thoughts and feelings, thoughts that revealed a strong-willed, determined girl hiding beneath the surface of a carefully controlled childhood. At the age of 11, Victoria discovered something that changed everything. Looking through a genealogy book with her governess, she realized for the first time just how close she truly was to the throne. According to the story her governess later told, young Victoria looked at the family tree, understood the truth, and said quietly, "I will be good." A simple sentence from an 11-year-old girl, but one that seemed to carry the weight of a destiny she was only just beginning to understand. Years passed under this strict, controlled upbringing. And then, in June 1837, everything changed in a single night. King William IV, Victoria's uncle and the reigning monarch, died in the early hours of the morning. Victoria was 18 years old. According to the accounts of that night, officials rushed to Kensington Palace before dawn to inform her. She was woken from her sleep, still in her nightgown, and told that she was now Queen of the United Kingdom. Imagine that moment. A young woman, controlled and watched every single day of her life, suddenly told that she now held more power than almost anyone else on earth. And here is where Victoria's true character finally revealed itself. The very first thing she did as queen was insist on meeting with her advisers completely alone, without her mother present, and without Sir John Conroy in the room. After years of never even being allowed to walk down a staircase in a company, 18-year-old Victoria stood in that room by herself, taking charge for the very first time in her entire life. She also immediately ordered that her bed be moved out of her mother's room forever. It was a small act, but it said everything about what kind of queen she intended to be. Victoria's early years on the throne were not smooth. She was young, inexperienced, and thrust suddenly into a role she had been prepared for in theory but never truly practiced. She relied heavily on her prime minister, Lord Melbourne, an older, experienced statesman who became something like a father figure and political mentor to her. Some critics worried she was too dependent on his guidance and too involved in political matters that a monarch was traditionally meant to stay above. There were difficult moments, too, including a scandal involving one of her ladies in waiting that damaged Victoria's public reputation. and revealed just how unprepared she still was for the pressures of public life. The young queen was intelligent and determined, but she was still learning, sometimes painfully, how to rule. Then, in 1840, Victoria's life changed again, this time through love. She married her first cousin, a German prince named Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Now, marriages among royal families at the time were often arranged purely for political reasons, with little regard for genuine affection. But Victoria and Albert's relationship became something different, something rare for royalty of that era. Victoria genuinely, deeply loved him. In her diaries, she wrote about him with real passion and admiration, describing him as beautiful and wonderful in every possible way. Interestingly, because Victoria was the reigning queen, it was actually she who proposed to Albert, not the other way around, a reversal of tradition that surprised many people at the time. Albert became far more than just a husband to Victoria. He became her closest adviser, her partner in nearly every decision, and a steady, calming influence on her sometimes stubborn and emotional temperament. He took a deep interest in science, industry, and education, helping to organize the Great Exhibition of 1851, a massive celebration of technology and progress from across the world, held inside a spectacular glass building known as the Crystal Palace. Together, Victoria and Albert had 9 children over the following years, and through those children, they would eventually become connected by marriage to royal families across nearly all of Europe, earning Victoria the nickname the Grandmother of Europe. But behind the public image of a happy family and a flourishing empire, Victoria privately struggled at times. She experienced what would today likely be recognized as postpartum depression after several of her pregnancies. She sometimes felt overwhelmed by the constant demands of motherhood alongside the enormous responsibilities of ruling an empire. Yet through it all, her marriage to Albert remained the steady center of her life, the one relationship where she felt truly understood. Then, in December 1861, tragedy struck in a way that would define the rest of Victoria's long life. Prince Albert became seriously ill, likely with typhoid fever, and within weeks, he was dead. He was only 42 years old. Victoria was utterly devastated. This was not simply grief. It was a collapse of the emotional foundation her entire adult life had been built upon. And here is where Victoria's story takes one of its most dramatic and unusual turns. She withdrew almost completely from public life. For years, she refused to appear at public ceremonies. She wore black mourning clothes for the rest of her life. For the remaining 4 decades she lived after Albert's death. She kept his rooms exactly as he had left them, with his clothes laid out and hot water brought in each morning, as though he might still return. Newspapers and the public began to criticize her sharply. They called her the Widow of Windsor. Some even questioned whether the monarchy itself was still worth keeping, given how absent their queen had become from public duties. This period, sometimes called Victoria's Great Retirement, lasted for years, and it genuinely threatened the future of the British monarchy. But slowly, gradually, Victoria began to reemerge, partly through the encouragement of politicians, and partly through her own inner strength returning bit by bit. She resumed her public duties. And remarkably, rather than fading away in that later half of her reign, Victoria's power and public presence grew stronger than ever before. Now, here's what makes this next part of the story so fascinating. Throughout the mid to late 1800s, the British Empire expanded to a scale the world had genuinely never seen before. By the height of Victoria's reign, roughly 1 out of every 4 people on the entire planet lived under British rule. India, vast territories across Africa, parts of the Caribbean, Australia, Canada, all connected, directly or indirectly, to the crown that Victoria wore. In 1876, she was given the additional title of Empress of India, cementing her position as ruler over an empire of staggering size and diversity. People began saying that the sun never set on the British Empire because at any given moment, somewhere within its vast territories, daylight was shining. Victoria's political relationships during this era were legendary in their own right. She developed a close, almost warm friendship with Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, a witty, charming statesman who knew exactly how to appeal to her personality, flattering her and treating her with genuine warmth and respect. In sharp contrast, her relationship with another Prime Minister, William Gladstone, was famously tense and cold. Victoria reportedly complained that Gladstone spoke to her as though she were addressing a public meeting, rather than speaking to her as a person. These contrasting relationships reveal something important about Victoria. She was not simply a passive figurehead sitting quietly on a throne. She held real opinions, real preferences, and she was not afraid to let them be known, even if the modern image of a constitutional monarch suggests she should have stayed neutral. As Victoria grew older, something unexpected happened. The woman who had once hidden from public view for years, wrapped in grief and mourning, became one of the most beloved and iconic figures in the entire world. In 1887, Britain celebrated her Golden Jubilee, marking 50 years on the throne, with massive public celebrations across the empire. 10 years later, in 1897, an even grander celebration took place, her Diamond Jubilee, celebrating 60 years as Queen. Crowds filled the streets of London. Representatives came from every corner of her vast empire to honor her. By this point in her life, Victoria was no longer simply a monarch. She had become a living symbol, a connecting thread running through an entire century of dramatic change, industrial revolution, scientific progress, and imperial expansion. Victoria survived several assassination attempts throughout her long reign, at least 8 separate attempts on her life over the decades, and each time, remarkably, her popularity with the public seemed to grow even stronger afterward as people rallied in support of their queen. She also lived long enough to see the world transform almost beyond recognition. She was born in an era of horse-drawn carriages and candlelight, and by the end of her life, she had witnessed the rise of railways connecting entire countries, the telegraph allowing instant communication across continents, and even early photographs and film capturing moving images of the world around her. By the final years of the 19th century, Victoria was an old woman in declining health, but still deeply devoted to her duties as queen. She continued working through official documents daily, meeting with ministers, and staying informed about the empire she had led for so long. Finally, in January 1901, at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, surrounded by several of her children and grandchildren, Queen Victoria died. She was 81 years old. She had reigned for 63 years, 7 months, and 2 days, a length of reign that, at the time, was the longest in British history, a record that would not be broken for over a century, until her own great-great-granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth II, eventually surpassed it. Victoria's funeral marked, in many ways, the symbolic end of an entire century. The era itself had come to be named after her, the Victorian Era, a period defined by industrial transformation, massive social change, and unprecedented imperial expansion. Her descendants, through those 9 children and the many marriages arranged across European royal houses, went on to sit on thrones across the continent, connecting Victoria by blood to royal families in Germany, Russia, Spain, and beyond, which is part of why she earned that lasting nickname, the Grandmother of Europe. So, what can we really take from the extraordinary life of Queen Victoria? Here was a girl raised under a suffocating system specifically designed to control her, to make her weak, dependent, and easily influenced. And yet, the very first moment she gained real power, she asserted her independence immediately and completely. Here was a woman who experienced devastating personal loss, grief so overwhelming it nearly ended her public life entirely, and yet she found her way back, not just to duty, but to becoming one of the most iconic and enduring symbols in modern history. Her reign was not without serious controversy. The empire she presided over brought undeniable hardship and injustice to millions of people across the territories it controlled, a complicated legacy that historians continue to study and debate to this day. But there is no question that Victoria herself, the individual woman behind the crown, transformed from an isolated, controlled child into a monarch whose name still defines an entire chapter of world history more than a century after her death. Thank you so much for listening to this incredible story today. If Queen Victoria's remarkable journey fascinated you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more true stories of history's most powerful and influential figures. Tell me in the comments which monarch or historical figure would you like me to cover next, and let me know where in the world are you watching from today. I always love hearing from you. See you in the next story, my friend.